A civil rights organization is joining efforts to stop the government from stifling free speech. The focus is on information related to COVID-19 and treatments for the disease circulating on social media. We hear from a member of the New Civil Liberties Alliance, or NCLA, on why they're taking up this fight. Joining us now is Jenin Younes, who is the litigation counsel for the New Civil Liberties Alliance. Thank you for joining us, Jenin.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, indeed. And now, why has the NCLA joined the state of Missouri in suing President Biden, HHS, and Dr. Anthony Fauci over allegedly censoring COVID-19 information on social media?
Well, because this is one of the worst First Amendment violations that I think we've ever seen in this country. The federal government is coercing tech companies and using them in order to accomplish its own censorship aims. So the federal government thinks that there's a problem with COVID, quote unquote, misinformation, and it's told tech companies that if they don't censor people who basically disagree with the government's message, then they will be penalized in the form of regulation or other legal action. The federal government can't use private companies to do what it can't do directly. So, we considered this a very grave issue. We actually had similar lawsuit a little bit earlier that was dismissed, although we're still pursuing that on appeal. And we had these 4 private plaintiffs who wanted to join, and so we joined on their behalf.
Certainly, it's a very important topic to discuss, big tech and how the information is spread. Now, in July 2021, Surgeon General Gov't Murthy said that big tech companies have allowed COVID misinformation to spread without being held accountable. He said this false information kept people from wearing masks in high-risk places, turn down proven treatments, and avoid the vaccine, all causing unnecessary illness and death. How does the lawsuit you've joined address this?
Well, Gov't Murthy's statements are part of it. There are also a number of other government officials or officials within the Biden administration who've said similar things. So Biden's spokeswoman, Jennifer Psaki, Alejandro Mayorkas. But then, as we've recently seen over the past couple of weeks, this campaign was even more extreme than we had realized. There were emails from DHS and from CDC that showed that the federal government was basically commanding tech companies to censor people. There's the CDC emails that were released last week actually single out certain people. One of them is Naomi Wolf, whose Twitter account was suspended shortly after, just a couple of weeks after the CDC is telling Twitter that she's spreading misinformation. So what we're seeing here is that the tech companies are acting at the behest of the government, which makes this a First Amendment issue. Now, would you say that there are any legitimate false pieces of information that could be classified as misinformation that are spreading that should be taken down? Well, that's a good question. Our plaintiffs, they're great plaintiffs because they're actually, 3 of them are doctors, scientists, who are epidemiologists and work in this area. And everything they've said has turned out to be true. So what the government is doing is censoring very valid debate. The First Amendment still protects lies. So the government can't say that you can't tell lies or spread what's called misinformation. Of course, that's harder to convince people that that's okay.
So in your view, that this information should be allowed to spread even if it is false?
Well, yes, I would argue that that's First Amendment protected, but our plaintiffs actually, nothing they have said is beyond the pale. They've said things like the studies actually show that masks don't work, are not very effective, which has turned out to be true. They said the vaccines don't stop transmission, that the vaccines have some side effects, that they've never been anti-vax or anything, but they've just made valid points that the American public deserves to hear.
And Jenin, in your view, what are the harms of the government intervening in this?
Oh, there are tons of harms. So people aren't, this is sort of crucial core First Amendment speech. This is why we have a First Amendment, because the framers of the Constitution recognize the government doesn't hold all the answers, and often they're wrong, and they wield their power in ways that are problematic. So what is happening is we're censoring very valid debate, for instance, about lockdowns and masks. The public isn't able to properly get the information that it needs to weigh in on the policies that we should have.
Jenin Younes, NCLA, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.